Alright, hey guys, welcome back to another video with Lim Reviews. So in today's video, I'm going to be using this mic because it just sounds so much better, so much clearer. But today I want to check out two very interesting mid-range devices. I have the OnePlus Nord here in one hand and the Samsung A71 in my other hand. So both devices are actually very good mid-range smartphones. And yeah, just to be clear, I know a lot of you guys are saying that the OnePlus Nord is supposed to be a flagship killer or something, but I've been using it for the past 2 weeks and definitely it is not like flagship level, but in terms of mid-range, I think it is a very strong mid-range device here. So naturally, the Samsung A71 is also known to be one of the better mid-range devices, so I thought it would be a good idea to just compare both devices and see which has its strengths in which areas, and maybe in case you are thinking of buying your next mid-range smartphone, maybe you can get some ideas on which to purchase following this video. Alright, so let's just begin with the price very quickly. Both devices cost about close to 400-ish US dollars. Again, pricing depends on where you're from, the countries that you're from, and of course they'll be different. So you gotta check the pricing out for your local area. Alright, so I know that the Samsung A71 is a bit unfair to the Samsung A71 because it's been out for almost half a year now, maybe even more because it was launched in December last year. But the OnePlus Nord just came out like mid this year, so naturally there is a bit more advantages to the OnePlus Nord. So I just want to say that before I begin with all the comparisons, so you guys know that we have a refreshed version of the specs and whatever on the OnePlus Nord, so it's going to be better a little bit. Alright, so let's just talk about the build quality first. Naturally, when I picked up the OnePlus Nord for the first time, it definitely feels like a premium device. Honestly speaking, it feels great in hand. So you really got to feel it instead of just watching the YouTube videos where people are all complaining about the plastic sides. Yes, I know the plastic sides are not the greatest part of the device, but if you just hold the device for once at least, you'll definitely feel the nice glass back at the back. We also have a very nice curved edges all over the sides, and it just feels great in hand. Moving on to the Samsung A71, the build quality is also pretty good because it's coming from Samsung. So nothing wrong with the build quality here, it's just that it doesn't feel that premium compared to the OnePlus Nord. Yeah, I'm really saying that. It feels a bit like plasticky all over the back and on the sides as well. But the thing is, it doesn't feel as premium as the OnePlus Nord. So it doesn't feel bad, it just doesn't feel as good as the OnePlus Nord, right? So okay, let's move on from the build quality. Moving on, let's talk about the display here. So if you put both devices side by side, naturally you'll be able to see that the Samsung A71 is slightly larger than the OnePlus Nord. So the OnePlus Nord is actually more fitting in my hand, I would say. It has a 6.44-inch 1080p AMOLED display. Whereas on the Samsung A71, it is a 6.7-inch 1080p AMOLED display. So both are great displays, colors are amazing, everything looks so good on both devices. It's really hard to pick one over the other in terms of display quality, but the main thing that the OnePlus Nord stands out here is just that 90Hz refresh rate. So it is blazing fast, everything is super fluid, whether you navigate through the menus and everything, although it might not be using the Snapdragon 865 kind of a processor, but it just feels as quick as those flagship devices, so quick. So I'm really appreciating the 90Hz display here. If you buy any smartphone in 2020, at least from this point onwards, you should really consider getting a device that comes with at least minimum 90Hz display. So yeah, this is one of the strongest points of the OnePlus Nord. Everything just seems so smooth and blazing fast that yeah, you don't feel any performance issues here. Alright, so that's just the display. Obviously, like I said, both are great with watching TV shows or YouTube, Netflix and anything. So they both fare very well there. But so just in terms of the speed and the kind of levels of smoothness, the OnePlus Nord takes the cake. Alright, moving on, let's talk about the processing power. So like I said, the OnePlus Nord came out later, so obviously it's using a more powerful chip. It comes with one of the latest Snapdragon 765 series. So it is very strong in terms of mid-range performance, if not one of the strongest. So definitely you won't face any lags here, everything is very smooth, and the fact that the Samsung A71 does come with a Snapdragon 730 processor is slightly lower, but it is not bad as well. So in terms of performance, I would say that both are equally smooth in terms of day-to-day use. If you play games a lot, like for me, I play Mobile Legends a lot, I realized that the game performance is actually the same on both devices. But one thing I must reiterate here is, again, that 90Hz display just makes everything so much more fluid and faster on the OnePlus Nord. So in terms of performance, actual performance and Geekbench scores, they're both very similar in terms of the 765 and 730 Snapdragon processors, but the main thing here is that the OnePlus Nord just feels so much faster because of that 90Hz display. Alright, moving on, let's talk a bit about the cameras. So both have a set of quad cameras here. On the OnePlus Nord, we have a 48 megapixel main, an 8 megapixel ultra wide, 5 megapixel depth, and a 2 megapixel macro, which we all know is pretty bad. Alright, okay, so on to the A71, we do have a slightly higher bump in terms of megapixels. We have a 64 megapixel main, a 12 megapixel ultra wide, a 5 megapixel depth, and a 5 megapixel macro sensor. Alright, so in terms of numbers alone, I would say that the Samsung A71 does have a little bit of advantage in terms of a higher number count for the megapixels. But it's not really all about megapixel count. So let's look at the image quality. So in terms of daylight shots, I would say that both devices actually fare pretty good in terms of daylight shots. They take great photos, there's not much things to complain about here. But if you just really want the extra bit more detail, maybe you can consider getting the A71 because it has that 64 megapixel main sensor. But otherwise, I would say in terms, if you're just going to share your photos on Instagram and Facebook and whatnot, it really doesn't differ much in terms of the image quality you're getting from both devices in terms of daylight shots. So moving on to night mode, I would say that the night mode on the OnePlus Nord is much better than the one on the A71. What I mean by that is just looking at the images side by side. I think I've mentioned in my previous video, the OnePlus Nord takes some really cool photos at night, especially when it has some kind of lights, street lamps around, because it has this kind of like a ball of light around this the lights itself, so it looks really cool. It has a really nice soft touch to the image, and I really like that about the OnePlus Nord. So it's not that the A71 does a bad job. The A71 does a good job at night modes as well, but I would say that the overall image, the one that gives you more feel and look, it just looks a bit better on the OnePlus Nord. So slight win to the OnePlus Nord in terms of night images there. Alright, so in terms of ultra wide, both devices take some pretty cool ultra wide images. I would say that because of the slight megapixel count on the A71, once again, you do get a slightly sharper image, but otherwise it is not much visible on the devices itself. So that's pretty much it for ultra wide. In terms of the macro shots, if you're the kind of guy who likes to take a lot of zoom in shots on, I don't know, small tiny objects, so yeah, definitely go for the A71 because the macro sensor on the OnePlus Nord is pretty bad, but you could always fix that by just using the main sensor to take close-up shots. So in terms of the camera, once again, like I said, it is very close here. It really depends on your personal preference these days. Like, some people prefer the one on the Nord, some prefer the one on the A71. There's no clear winner here, but if you ask me, I'll go for the ones on the OnePlus Nord. Yep. Alright, so moving on to the selfie camera, we do have 32 megapixel selfie cameras for both devices. Obviously, the one on the OnePlus Nord comes with an ultra wide, so you can take like even wider shots with your device. So it's good that we have that here because it helps a lot with taking selfies with your group of friends, for example. You can really get really wide in this selfie, and I think that's pretty great. So definitely appreciate the extra wide angle selfie camera on the OnePlus Nord. Alright, in terms of sound quality, they both don't sound really good, I would say. They both sound okay-ish. Not to say bad, but not to say great. And they both come with a single firing speaker, so yeah, don't expect too much from that. But the main difference here is that the Samsung A71 retains the headphone jack at the bottom. So for all of you guys who are using like headphones like me, you know, this wired kind of thing, you might not have seen it for a very long time, but yeah, it still will work on the Samsung A71 because you can plug it in. But on the OnePlus Nord, yeah, you just can't do that, alright? Yeah, so, Alright, so moving on to the battery life. The OnePlus Nord comes with a 4150 mAh battery, whereas the A71 comes with a slightly larger 4500 mAh battery. So what's the main thing here? The main difference here is actually the charging system. So on the OnePlus Nord, you could charge with the dash charger that comes in the box, and it goes really fast. It goes to 70% in just 30 minutes, whereas on the A71, I didn't really time it, but it takes about, in 30 minutes, it gets about maybe 50% maybe, but yeah, it just supports fast charging 25 watts, so not the quickest out there, but again, it has a slightly larger battery, so it will be able to last slightly longer than the OnePlus Nord. But then again, like I said, you could charge up the Nord very quickly, so it really depends on what's your preference. For me, I would say that both are okay because it will last you throughout the entire day with no issues, so always good to have a slightly faster charging that is available on the Nord. Alright guys, I think I've pretty much covered all the main points here. At the end of the day, it's really down to user experience. I like the Oxygen OS on the OnePlus Nord. It's just so clean, doesn't come with much bloat and all that. But on the Samsung A71, it does come with a lot of unneeded apps. Yeah, it does come with a lot of unneeded apps, and I mean the user interface is actually pretty okay. It's not very cluttered, but if you just want to put both side by side, I would say that I might go with the Oxygen OS compared to the One UI on the Samsung A71. Alright guys, I think that's pretty much it for this video. Once again, it really depends on which you prefer. I think if it is down to today, which device should you purchase, I might actually recommend a OnePlus Nord just because it excels in so many different areas. And of course, like I said, this is a mid-range device battle if you want to call it that way. But yeah, the OnePlus Nord actually does pretty well here. Okay, I think that's pretty much it for this video. Once again, this is Lim from Lim Reviews. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them down in the comment section below. See you guys in the next one. Hope you guys have a great week. Bye!